The shuttle descended through a thick curtain of gray haze, its hull reverberating with the muted rumbles of atmospheric resistance. Outside the reinforced viewport, the surface of Zorak 10 emerged, bleak, desolate, and stitched with artificial lighting that pierced the perpetual fog like veins of white fire. The moon was cold, remote, and avoided by most of the galaxy's military and scientific personnel. But for Maya Torres, it was a dream assignment. She sat alone in the observation seat of the incoming shuttle, legs crossed tightly, hands resting on a worn field tablet. Her brown curls were loosely tied back, and her eyes, dark and alert, scanned the preliminary data reports that had been sent ahead from the containment team. She had read them 3 times already, but the lines still felt detached, too sterile to be believable. Subject, Drogal, genus Throxy, class, Xenopredator, status, active threat, level, red interaction log. 22 encounters, 14 fatalities, 0 successful attempts at containment-based conditioning. Response pattern, unpredictable. Aggression index, 9.7/10. Recommendation, full isolation. No interspecies exposure, non-sentient interaction only. She read the numbers again. 14 fatalities, 22 attempts, 0 success. The Droggle had been designated the galaxy's most lethal contained predator for over 5 years, and yet none of it aligned with the grainy, distorted footage she had viewed from previous encounters. It wasn't the violence that caught her attention. It was the creature's eyes. In the slowed frame she had replayed dozens of times, the Droggle had stood over a collapsed security droid covered in synthetic blood and scorched armor. The scene should have been horrifying, and it was, until the beast turned toward the wall camera, its jaws dripping, its body heaving. For 3 seconds, it stared. Not with blind rage, not with triumphant bloodlust. It looked afraid. The shuttle landed on the northern pad of Base 3, one of 3 military installations erected specifically for the containment and monitoring of the Drogall. Her boots touched down with a soft hiss as the ramp extended. The air outside was thinner than standard, biting cold, and carried the scent of ozone and sterilization chemicals. 2 security officers in matte gray armor stood at attention at the bottom of the ramp. One of them, a human, gave her a curt nod. "Dr. Torres?" he asked. She nodded. "Maya Torres, Xenobiology Division, Earth UNB. Follow me. Commander Pellar is expecting you in briefing room 7. They led her down a corridor of harsh lights and echoing footsteps. The facility was utilitarian. Bare metal walls, reinforced blast doors, and constant surveillance nodes embedded in the ceiling. Everything was built for control, not comfort. She passed through 3 biometric scans and a secondary retina check before she was allowed access to the internal ring. Inside the briefing room, a tall Scarith officer awaited her. Commander Pellar, whose chitinous skin shimmered green back beneath the layered officer's robes. His voice came out low and gravelly through the translator clipped to his collar. "Dr. Torres," he said, gesturing to the seat across the table, "we reviewed your research on instinct-based interspecies rapport, and yet I must inform you, your time here is strictly observational." She sat down, meeting his gaze. "I understand." He leaned forward. "Do you? Because the last civilian researcher who stepped within 200 meters of the containment unit left in 3 sealed containers." Maya's face remained neutral. "I'm not interested in direct contact. I'm here to study behavioral patterns through secondary simulation review and environmental trace analysis." He blinked slowly. "That is acceptable. For now." On the wall behind him, a large screen activated, displaying a top-down layout of the containment facility. 6 concentric zones, all separated by electric field barriers, shockwave newel fields, and 2 defensive drone rings. In the center, labeled Zone 0, was the Drogall chamber. 20 meters in diameter, artificially forested with spikes of mineral shards and U-simulated lighting. A single atmospheric node regulated pressure and scent emission. With adequate lighting, PE, and a little over 1 million microfences placed in the distance. "The subject," Pellar began, "has not responded to any method of containment conditioning, no attempts at communication, no recognition of mirrored movements. It has killed all but 1 combat drone placed within reach. That drone was left partially disabled, but intact." When we sent another after retrieval, the creature obliterated it. No discernible pattern. Maya tilted her head. Did you try thermal empathy modulations? Peller's mandibles clicked. What do you mean? She brought up a smaller data screen from her tablet. On my last field study, a mammalian predator from Oak Ridge 7 responded to temperature encode memory playback. Its aggression wasn't instinctive, it was emotional, tied to heat fluctuation patterns. Did you test for emotional resonance? We ran neural scans, high-level aggression responses, no emotional markers. You ran human scans, she said quietly. What if you missed the shape of its cognition entirely? He stiffened. You think we're incompetent? No, she said. I think you've been treating this creature like a problem instead of a question. A pause hung in the air between them. Pilar's eyes narrowed, and then he leaned back. You'll have access to the archive and the environmental spectrograph data, but you are forbidden from entering zones 3 and below. That line is not negotiable. I understand, she repeated. Later that evening, Maya reviewed the footage on her own, seated in a small monitoring booth overlooking the fourth ring. Still, a full 2 zones away from the containment core. From this distance, the Drogal couldn't be seen clearly. Only the faint distortion on the inner screens showed signs of its motion. The creature was larger than she had expected, nearly 3 meters in height when standing upright, but mostly it stalked on all fours, its front limbs thicker and equipped with barbed digits capable of crushing synthetic bone. Its skin was a matte charcoal, interrupted by bioluminescent lines that pulsed with a rhythm no one had yet deciphered. Its mouth could open to a horizontal split along the lower jaw, exposing multiple rows of blunt teeth, not serrated but designed for prey. Still, it wasn't the body that fascinated her. It was the posture. The Drogal didn't pace like a hungry predator. It moved in circles along the same edge of its enclosure, occasionally pausing, looking toward the corner where the light was faintest. It never roared. It never howled. It just moved, with a heavy kind of awareness, like a dog in a cage too small for its body. Maya leaned forward. You're not a monster, she whispered. You're scared out of your mind. Behind her, the door hissed open, and a technician entered. Shift's ending in 10 minutes, Dr. Torres. She nodded. I'll be done soon. The technician hesitated. You're not planning anything unauthorized, right? Maya didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the screen, on the quiet shape moving in the fog-dimmed pen. And when the beast paused and lifted its head again, looking directly toward the faintest camera with a soft, almost audible rumble, she didn't flinch. Instead, she whispered again, You look like a big puppy. And the creature stilled, just for a second, but she saw it, and she smiled. Maya stood in the monitoring station the next evening, once again alone. The hallways outside were quieter than usual, most of the personnel having rotated out early due to an incoming radiation burst from the neighboring system. Containment protocols had been reinforced, but Maya had been granted extended observational access, part of her request when she accepted the post. She had barely moved in hours. Her eyes stayed fixed on the movement logs and heat readings from Zone 0, where the Drogal continued its endless pacing. Her tablet recorded every flicker of infrared activity, but her gaze was locked on something less measurable, a subtle tremor in the creature's pattern. It was slowing, hesitating, and for the first time since she arrived, turning toward the central light node rather than away from it. She leaned forward, adjusting the contrast. The creature paused in the deepest corner again. This time, instead of pacing, it sat, a mass of muscle and quiet stillness. The readings showed no spikes in aggression, only pressure, breath, and body heat. Maya whispered again under her breath, You're not just reacting, you're waiting. Then the alarm sounded. A blaring red pulse lit the observation deck, and a synthetic voice cut across the silence. Containment breach. Zone 3. Lock integrity compromised. Re-engage security. Maya stood up instantly, her heart pounding. The surveillance feeds flickered. One drone lost visual, then another. The lockdown barriers between Zones 3 and 4 faltered for just under 2 seconds. Barely long enough to register as an actual breach, but enough to throw the system into semi-manual override. Her comlink buzzed. All personnel to fallback positions, initiate drone suppression sweep. She reached for the comm panel but froze. Through the cracked visual feed from Zone 3, she heard something. A distorted sound buried under static. A voice. Not mechanical. Not alien. It was human. For the drama. It was faint, drawn out, cut off. She looked around the observation deck, but there was no one else. She leaned close to the feed and replayed the burst. There it was again. Don't. Lock it. Her stomach twisted. She tapped the console and accessed the chamber logs. There had been no authorized entry to Zone 3 in the past 6 hours. The only ID that had entered recently was an untagged maintenance signal, an automated drone request from engineering, improperly logged. Someone was inside. She activated the speaker channel, overriding the auto lock. "This is Dr. Maya Torres. If anyone can hear me in Zone 3, respond." Nothing. Another flicker on the screen. Motion. The Dragal had moved. Rapidly. Her pulse spiked. The creature was approaching the inner edge of Zone 2, nearer to the security door that led to the central control panel, nearer to whoever was inside. The system's auto-response began to cycle. Drones would be released within 90 seconds. The zone would be flooded with concussion gas. If someone was inside, he or she would die. No one else was reacting fast enough. She didn't think. She ran down the corridor, past 2 checkpoint nodes, through the first bioauthentication panel. She slammed her palm onto the ID lock and bypassed the second layer with her emergency field clearance. The system hesitated, then granted her partial override. The doors to Zone 3 hissed open, and she stepped through just as the pressure seals locked behind her. Instant silence, only her breath. The air was thick, sterile, and smelled faintly of coolant and scorched plastic. Warning lights blinked along the ceiling, casting long red shadows across the curved metallic walls. She moved fast, boots hitting the grating with sharp clicks. Her flashlight swept the corridor as she made her way toward the core access port. Halfway down the corridor, she found the source of the signal. A man, unconscious. He was slumped against a maintenance panel, a plasma burn along the edge of his left arm. His uniform was standard tech crew, but his clearance badge had been stripped off. Maya knelt, checking his vitals. He was alive, but barely. The seal on his helmet was cracked. The Dragal's pen was less than 30 meters beyond the reinforced gate behind her. She heard the soft, rhythmic thudding of something massive shifting in the shadows. Maya pressed the emergency override on the man's comm patch and transmitted a general call. "This is Torres. Found an unconscious technician in Zone 3. He's injured. I'm requesting emergency medevac and temporary lockdown lift." No reply. She tried again. Silence. Then something scraped metal. A low, guttural sound vibrated through the walls. Deep, rumbling, and close. She turned toward the far end of the corridor and saw movement beyond the semi-permanent force shield. The Dragal was there, massive, silent, still. It had not attacked. It simply stood in the cold glow of the containment light, watching her. Maya rose slowly, keeping her hands visible. Her instincts screamed for her to fall back, to activate the shield, to lock herself behind the emergency barrier, but she didn't move toward it. She took one step forward. The Dragal's eyes, gold-ringed, wide, and unblinking, followed her. Its head tilted. Maya raised one hand, palm out. Her voice came out slow, careful. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The Dragal didn't growl. It didn't lunge. It didn't bare its teeth. It sat right there in front of the partially transparent wall. It lowered its massive form to the ground, rested its front limbs, and huffed softly. Maya could barely breathe. Behind her, the technician stirred faintly. The Dragal heard it too. Its ears flicked. It didn't move. Maya turned slightly. "He needs help. I can't carry him alone." The Dragal's eyes followed her every movement, but made no sign of aggression. She reached for the emergency beacon clipped to the wall, activated it, and dragged the man carefully toward the exit hatch. Still, the beast did not charge. It simply watched, curious, alert. Maya looked back once, and for a second, only a second, she could have sworn its eyes softened. The medevac team burst into Zone 3 minutes later. They found her kneeling beside the technician, who had just regained consciousness. The security captain rushed forward. "Dr. Torres, what the hell were you doing in a live breach zone?" She didn't answer right away. She looked toward the gate. The Dragal had moved again, back to the corner where the light was faintest. She stood slowly, brushing dust from her knees. "Your creature's not what you think it is," she said softly. Then she looked the captain in the eyes. "It saw me. It understood I wasn't a threat. and it didn't attack. He frowned. That doesn't mean anything. She turned away. Apparently means everything. Maya didn't sleep that night. She lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling while shadows shifted across the curved wall panels. Her mind replayed the moment again and again, when the Droggle had seen her and didn't attack, when it sat down, when it chose calm over chaos. Nothing in the logs, nothing in the blood-stained histories, nothing in the fear-soaked briefings prepared her for what she had witnessed. The official report on the breach was filed within hours. The technician she had dragged out of Zone 3 had been identified as Eli Dormund, a junior systems engineer who had ignored protocol and attempted to bypass a corrupted maintenance relay inside the red zone. He survived, barely. No one asked how he got in. No one addressed why the Droggal hadn't torn him apart. Instead, Command shut the entire quadrant down and doubled the perimeter drones. The message was clear. Silence the anomaly, reinforce the myth. But the question burned in Maya's mind. Why didn't it attack? By morning, her access privileges had been limited, her override clearance revoked. Even her research permissions were flagged for administrative review. She was expected to submit to a debrief the following day. The implication was unmistakable. Keep your mouth shut, move along. She didn't. Instead, she did what no one else had done. Not in years of testing, probing, and posturing. She walked to the observation deck, waited for the shift change, and when the technician on duty left for his scheduled hour off-grid, she logged into the manual camera interface and accessed the secondary visual channel of Zone 0. The Droggal was awake. It was pacing again, but slower this time, less erratic. Its massive paws padded across the reinforced floor, claws tapping with a hollow rhythm. The deep, black skin of its flank shimmered faintly beneath the filtered lighting. When it turned, Maya saw its eyes catch the camera light, gold-rimmed, focused, and then it stopped. She leaned closer to the screen. The Droggal walked slowly to the central area, where one of the old synthetic trees had collapsed during a prior drone suppression event. It nosed the shattered bark aside, sniffed once, then circled down onto the ground and, almost unbelievably, curled into a resting posture, tail wrapping loosely over its haunches. Maya stared. Not even the senior xenobiologists had recorded this behavior. She activated the local speaker channel, audio only, and waited a breath. Then she whispered, "You really do look like a puppy." The Droggal's ears twitched. Her breath caught, had lifted its head. She didn't raise her voice. "I know you can hear me." The creature stood slowly, approached the central visual node. It didn't slam into the barrier. It didn't growl. It looked at the source of the sound and tilted its head. Maya's heart thudded behind her ribs. Her hands trembled. "You're not a monster, are you?" She wasn't expecting an answer, but she got one, not in words. The Droggal pressed its forehead gently against the containment wall, just once. Then it backed away and sat again. Later that afternoon, a memo appeared in her personal file. Anonymous, unsigned. "One more breach of protocol and you'll be removed from the moon. You're not here to test theories, you're here to observe." But something else arrived later. A smaller file. No sender listed. A short video clip. In the recording, a much younger Dragdoll, smaller, unscarred, sat in a differently designed chamber. A figure in environmental armor, likely human based on proportions, knelt just outside the barrier. The creature did not attack. The figure extended an arm. The Dragdoll did the same. They touched, through glass, perhaps, or a low-frequency field. The timestamp was 6 years old. The file ended before the subject's name or origin could be verified. Maya stared at it for nearly an hour. The Droggal wasn't born violent. It had learned violence. That night, she returned to the observation deck after lights out. She bypassed the door using a trick she'd picked up working in older Earthside labs, manipulating thermal sensors with a pulse coil and relooping the system's standby state. She sat in the chair before the monitor and, for the first time, initiated the bidirectional audio channel. "I'm here," she said. The Droggal rose from its corner. She continued, "Think I understand. You've been alone a long time, haven't you?" The beast didn't move closer, but it didn't retreat. Maya watched its posture. Its muscles didn't tense. Its claws remained retracted. The flick of its tail was not hostile, but idle. She leaned in. You weren't angry that day, you were scared. The creature blinked. I saw it in your eyes. They stepped forward. Her hands hovered above the console controls in case of emergency lock, but she didn't trigger them. I'm going to ask for reclassification, she said quietly. They'll probably laugh or fire me, but I'll do it anyway. The Dragol stood directly in front of the primary visual node. Maya smiled. Because the galaxy calls you a predator. But I've seen you now. And all I see, she paused, is someone who just wants to be seen. The creature exhaled, a slow, long breath. Then, in a motion so deliberate it couldn't have been coincidence, it lowered itself to the ground and rested its head on its front paws. It looked at her and wagged its tail. Once, Maya couldn't help it. She laughed softly. The sound echoed through the chamber's quiet. You really are a big puppy. She knew she was risking everything. Her clearance, her research, even her credibility. But she also knew that, for the first time since arriving on Xerox 10, she wasn't observing a threat. She was meeting someone. Not a beast, not a weapon, but a soul that had been trapped in misunderstanding for too long. As she sat in the darkness, watching the galaxy's most feared predator fall asleep like a dog under a tree, she whispered a final thought into the mic before powering it down. Let's show them who you really are. The next morning, Maya sat in the administrative review chamber, flanked by 2 silent security officers and an unreadable panel of 5 ranking personnel. The room was circular and intentionally disorienting. White floors, white walls, white ceiling, illuminated by soft ambient light that left no shadows. At the center, Commander Pellar stood with his arms behind his back and his thorax still as stone. The translator unit at his collar blinked once before activating. Dr. Torres, he said, you violated containment protocol, initiated unauthorized access to restricted audio channels, and directly interacted with a Category A lethal biological entity without clearance. Maya nodded. Yes. He tilted his head slightly, mandibles tightening. Do you dispute the facts of your actions? Oh. A murmur rose from the observers behind the glass partition. Journalists, off-world analysts, and internal staff had all been invited to witness the disciplinary hearing. Pellar held up a hand, and silence returned. Your report states that the Dragol responded to you not with aggression but with familiarity, that it rested in your presence, that it wagged its tail. Yes. Do you understand how ridiculous that sounds? Maya leaned forward. I do. But it happened. Pellar's tone dropped. 14 lives were lost to that thing. Entire stations evacuated, hundreds of failed hours spent trying to neutralize its behavior. And you would have us believe it simply needed, what, kindness? No, she said softly. I believe it needed recognition. A mind can be violent without being evil. A species can defend itself without being monstrous. The Dragol learned fear long before it ever lashed out. The Scarith commander stared at her, saying nothing. Your predecessor knew this, she continued. I saw the footage. There was an attempt years ago, a moment. It wasn't public, but it was real. Another murmur stirred behind the glass. Pellar's gaze hardened. That footage was sealed for a reason. Maya held his stare. But not erased. He stepped back, arms folding tightly across his chest. You've created a wave. Word of your encounter has reached the Central Science Directorate. Debates have started, models have been redrafted. You've created doubt where certainty was established. The cost of that doubt may be greater than the truth itself. Maya didn't flinch. If your version of truth can't withstand observation, it was never truth. The panel recessed for deliberation. Maya remained seated, alone in the chamber, her palms warm and her pulse steady. She knew this wouldn't end in praise or apology. She expected to be removed, possibly blacklisted, but none of it mattered now, because she had already been called back, not by command, by the Dragol. That afternoon, under heavy security supervision, she was escorted back to the observation chamber, not as punishment, but as part of a re-evaluation protocol ordered by the Galactic Zoological Ethics Committee. For the first time in the facility's operational history, human interaction was being authorized within visual and audio proximity of the Dragol, under calm state condition. A corridor had been modified, a dual-seal enclosure constructed. Maya stood behind a transparent barrier of electromagnetic shielding, dressed in a reinforced but non-aggressive biosuit. Pale gray, no color indicators, no visible threats. Across the chamber, the Draugal emerged from its rest. It saw her immediately. The guards behind her tensed, weapons half raised. She didn't move. The Draugal stepped forward, slowly, cautiously. Its breath formed shallow plumes in the filtered air. Then, without a sound, it sat and wagged its tail. The command staff watching from the upper platform said nothing. The scientists murmured into microphones. Data poured into screens. Algorithms began recalculating aggression probabilities. Maya did not speak immediately. She lowered her posture, sinking to one knee. "Hello again," she said. The Draugal made a deep, chesty exhale, half growl, half chuffing breath. Maya extended one gloved hand toward the barrier. The Draugal did the same, pressing its broad paw flat against the transparent field. The scientists, watching behind reinforced glass, were frozen in place. Maya turned her head slightly toward the internal comm mic. "I'm requesting temporary transfer of the subject to extended behavioral study. No sedation. No confinement beyond what is necessary for mutual comfort." A dozen officials protested at once. Denied. Unacceptable. This is reckless. Maya held up a hand. "If you deny the request, I'll submit my resignation and publish the footage to every ethical board in the inner systems. Then you'll be debating this creature's sentience in the court of public opinion, not in a sterile lab." "Silence," Hilar's voice crackled over the channel. "You're threatening us? I'm giving you a choice. The galaxy will want answers. Better those answers come from this station than from 1,000 theories born in outrage." 10 hours later, the approval came through. The Draugal, now designated Subject K9H, Subsentient Class Unconfirmed, was moved into a new chamber. Not a cell, a habitat. Larger, softer. Equipped with atmospheric modulation calibrated to its natural rhythms. Maya was allowed 4 hours of supervised interaction per cycle, each session closely monitored. The guards still held weapons, but they no longer pointed them. Over the following days, something extraordinary happened. The Draugal began to mimic, not perfectly, not with human clarity, but enough to show intent. It responded to her tone of voice. It sat when asked, slowly, clumsily, but deliberately. It blinked in rhythm when she counted aloud. It even learned to recognize its own name. Coda. Spoken softly, over and over, until it rumbled in response each time. One day, when Maya brought in a soft pressure ball embedded with olfactory markers, Coda sniffed it, nudged it with his snout, and then pushed it back toward her with one heavy paw. It wasn't just play, it was trust. The footage leaked, perhaps accidentally, perhaps intentionally. Within a week, the story had spread across half the galaxy. The Draugal, the so-called most lethal predator in known space, was shown dozing beside a human researcher, tail flicking gently, eyes half closed. A second clip showed Coda pressing his forehead to the barrier as Maya whispered something unintelligible. And just like that, the narrative shattered. Some called it a hoax. Others accused the facility of genetic tampering. But many more wanted to know if this creature could bond, could mimic, could express calm and empathy. What else had been misunderstood? Maya ignored the headlines. She focused on Coda. She spoke to him as one would speak to a shy child. Never loud, never sharp. She learned his posture cues. When his jaw tightened, it meant discomfort. When his spines laid flat, it meant ease. When his tail curved low but moved slowly, he was curious. When he leaned against the chamber wall after she left, it meant he wanted her to stay. He didn't need a cage. He needed connection. In time, other xenologists joined her. Some watched cautiously. Others entered the chamber, trembling but left speechless. One of them, a Carolee researcher named Verines, wrote in his preliminary report, "If this is a predator, then I too have misjudged every instinct I once trusted. He is not what we feared, he is what we forgot how to see." One morning, Maya entered the habitat earlier than usual. Coda was waiting at the gate. She stepped inside and he approached. Not aggressively, not clumsily. He stopped one pace away and bowed his massive head. She laughed. "Good boy." The briefing room was brighter than usual. The light panels along the ceiling had been adjusted to simulate mid-morning daylight, a small detail that signaled something larger. People had begun caring about impressions again. The sterility of secrecy was giving way to the tension of visibility. Maya stood near the window, watching the containment habitat far below as Coda paced in gentle loops beneath the artificial canopy. He was calm, curious, and, according to every updated behavioral matrix, no longer a confirmed threat. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt uneasy. The walls around her echoed with soft conversation. Scientists, military advisors, and ethics delegates from half a dozen species were settling into the seats behind her. This was the formal hearing, one that would determine whether Coda could be reclassified under a new, unprecedented designation: non-sentient, predatory species, empathic-capable class. A bureaucratic phrase, but its implications were profound. If passed, it would change how the galaxy defined threat. But not everyone was ready to accept that. Across the room, Commander Pelar entered through the north door. His expression was unreadable. He gave Maya a small nod, neither warm nor dismissive. He was not her opponent anymore, but he was not yet an ally. She turned toward the center podium as the session began. A representative from the High Committee of Interstellar Ethics stood to address the council. A tall Valari woman named Jirena Vey, she carried herself with the ease of someone used to shaping policy with words. The footage is verified. The subject exhibits patterned responses to positive human interaction: mimicry, de-escalation, obedience under low-pressure conditions. But the question remains, does this creature exhibit empathy or merely learned behavior? Maya stepped forward. Is there a difference? Jirena's brow arched. You're implying instinctive behavioral mimicry is equivalent to understanding. Maya shook her head. I'm suggesting the definition of understanding has been biased from the beginning. Jirena folded her hands. The Drogal has taken lives. So have humans, Maya said evenly. So have most of your species. But we don't classify ourselves by our worst moments alone. Several murmurs rose from the audience. Jirena did not flinch. Are you suggesting the creature should be given rights? I'm suggesting it deserves protection, Maya answered, and a future that doesn't start with a rifle in its face. Jirena tilted her head. And what if your trust is misplaced? Maya looked her in the eye. Then I'll take responsibility, but let the consequences come from truth, not fear. Later that day, she walked through the lower corridor of the behavioral facility, hands buried in her jacket pockets, breath fogging in the chilled air. The official vote would take another 12 hours. Until then, she had permission to visit Coda. One last scheduled session. When she entered the habitat chamber, he was already at the gate, his golden-ringed eyes meeting hers with the same quiet recognition as always. He lowered his head as she approached, and she reached out, running one gloved hand gently along the base of his ear. The rumble that echoed through his chest was soft. Half purr, half exhale. She laughed. You're not subtle, you know. She took a seat on the ground, cross-legged. Coda followed and curled beside her, his warmth radiating against her arm. I think I made them nervous, she said. Coda blinked slowly. I told them you deserve more than a cage, that you're not a monster. He nudged her shoulder gently with his snout. She smiled. And then I wondered if I was wrong. Just for a second. The silence stretched. The chamber lights dimmed slightly to simulate late afternoon. Coda didn't move. His breathing slowed, steady and calm. Maya leaned her head back against his side. I've read thousands of pages about fear, but I never understood how fear clings to structure, how it convinces us that control is safer than connection. Coda shifted slightly, then rested his chin on her knee. She went quiet, fingers tracing the soft edge of his massive forepaw. I used to think trust was the key. But it's not. Coda opened one eye. It's the threat, she whispered. Trust terrifies people more than danger ever did. She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. But maybe fear isn't supposed to disappear. Maybe it just needs a place to sit quietly until it decides it doesn't need to bite. She looked down at him. I'm going to fight for you, whatever happens next. He watched her in silence. She turned toward the exit. As she stepped through the inner gate, Coda made a low, almost imperceptible sound. 3 short pulses, rising in tone. She paused. Ooh, what was that? He repeated it, her brow furrowed. It wasn't mimicry. It wasn't a sound he had learned from her. It was something else, she whispered. Is that your word for me? He blinked. She smiled and placed one hand on the barrier. I'll remember it. Hours later, as the council gathered to deliver the vote, a ripple of messages spread through the upper networks. Debates ignited in real time. Security archives were requested. A senator from the Thalhari delegation stood and demanded closed-section discussion. But Maya wasn't in the hearing room anymore. She sat in the dark observation deck, alone, watching Koda sleep. She didn't need to hear the decision to know what would come next. The truth had already been seen, and once seen, it would never fit back into a cage.